CBS News projects Joe Biden has flipped one of the key Midwestern states President Trump won back in 2016. The former vice president is expected to win Michigan. Our estimate currently shows him leading by about 150,000 votes. Now remember, when the president won this state back in 2016, he beat Hillary Clinton by just 10,000 votes. I want to bring in the state's Attorney General, Dana Nessel, now. She joins me from Plymouth, Michigan. Attorney General, welcome. Great to have you with us. So you were elected in 2018 in a blue wave in Michigan. You flipped your seat for Democrats, as did Governor Gretchen Whitmer and Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. Democrats also gained 2 House seats in the state. So when you look at not just Biden's victory, but at the margin by which he leads the president, what does that tell you about your state and how it's changed over the last 4 years?
Well, I don't know that our state has changed substantially. Maybe it was just a matter of learning a little bit more about what President Trump was all about and what his party was about, and wanting something very different from that, and seeing that that wasn't very good for our country and certainly wasn't very good for the state of Michigan. And
so even though we've already projected victory for Biden, of course, the vote counting continues. What is your state doing to make sure that every vote in Michigan is counted?
Well, we believe that we had an incredibly fair and thorough election, and that it was conducted, in accordance with the rules, and that the results accurately reflect the will of the people of our state. So, we are now being subjected to a number of different lawsuits, and there are spurious allegations of fraud that, are simply untrue, because it appears as though there are those who have lost in this state that really can't fathom that they have not won the election. And it's really unfortunate, because it's not something that we're used to seeing either in the state or nationally. We know that the Trump campaign has filed a number of different suits in different states that either he's lost or it looks like he's headed in that direction. And it's too bad, because it really undermines our democracy and the integrity of the election. And we believe that everything was done properly here in Michigan, and that the results ought to be certified. So, that the candidates don't get to pick the winners, the voters do, and the voters of the state of Michigan have spoken.
Very, very good point. The candidates don't get to pick the winners. As you mentioned about the lawsuits, President Trump is threatening legal action to, invalidate some ballots in your state. A judge has already ruled one of the president's suits is unlikely to succeed on its merits. How are you planning to respond?
Well, the judge in the Court of Claims case has already dismissed that case. So I guess if it is appealed, then we will respond accordingly. We think that these suits are frivolous and completely and wholly lacking in merit, and that there's no factual basis to support these claims. So we'll be continuing to make those claims in court as long as it's necessary. But in the meantime, we'll be moving forward with the certification process. And we believe that our slate of 16 electors, when they go to Washington, D.C., they will be indicating that Joe Biden is the winner of the state of Michigan.
And of course, Attorney General, this was not a normal election simply because it took place during a pandemic. Were there any lessons learned from this, voting period that you might be able to use looking forward into the future in further elections?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. First of all, this is our first time in Michigan that we have no reason absentee voting in the state. We passed that as a proposal in 2018. So it's our first time in a general election. We had about 3.3 Michigan voters who elected to vote absentee. And of course, no better time to be able to do that than during the course of a global pandemic. But I will say what was extremely troubling to me were the concerns that were posed by the delays in the Postal Service. And of course, myself and many other attorneys general across the state had to sue the Postmaster General because there were deliberate delays that were intended to disenfranchise voters. And I very much believe that they achieved their intended purpose. And I myself inspected not one but two postal distribution facilities, one in Detroit and one in Pontiac. And what I saw was incredibly troubling. And what I know to be true is this: there were likely many, many voters in my state that were disenfranchised and that likely never had the opportunity, certainly to vote absentee, but likely never voted at all, only because of these delays in the Postal Service. So that's something that we're going to have to be really careful of in the future. And if we have to get court rulings ahead of time, that's what we'll do. But hopefully we'll never see a Postmaster General abuse the Postal Service the way we saw it in 2020.
And to your point, are there still mail-in ballots that you believe have not been delivered?
Well, I can't confirm that because I haven't been back to these facilities. But unfortunately, in accordance with the rulings on the cases where there were challenges to that in our state, those can't be accepted and they cannot be counted. The courts have ruled that all absentee ballots have to be in the hands of the local clerks by 8 o'clock November 3rd. So even if they had been mailed a month ago, they still wouldn't count if they were not received by the clerk in time.
Right, but is there someone who is still, counting all of the ballots that are coming in, even after the deadline, just for the purposes of being able to, show the Postal Service where they had weakness in their system?
Yes, this will still be tallied. I mean, they won't be part of the official vote, but we'll know how many instances that occurred in. And we saw that actually during the primary. So we know there were at least 6,000 voters in our state that voted absentee whose ballots did not count in that election. And I think it was far, far greater number likely in the general election than in the primary.
Is this something you're going to continue to keep on top of, Attorney General?
Oh, yeah. I'll be working with the Secretary of State, and we'll be discussing it further as further information develops. But I have to tell you, I really don't think this case is over yet. There were numerous cases that were filed against the Postmaster General. He actually refused the directives of the court because he was directed to do sweeps on Election Day to ensure that there were no more ballots left, and that if there were, that they were delivered on a timely basis. And he simply refused to do that. So whether or not he'll be held in contempt of court, whether there'll be further proceedings, I guess we'll have to stay tuned, but I imagine that there will be consequences.
All right. Well, Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.